Thank you for joining our webinar. All participants will be placed on mute. We encourage you to ask questions by typing them in the chat window. We'll get started shortly.
Hello and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Brett Greathouse. I am the President and CEO of Touchpoint Solutions, a Salesforce.com consulting group. And we're excited to be joined today by Mark Mortensen, who is from Salus Homecare. And we're going to be walking through how Salus has used Salesforce to really optimize their business, and hopefully it will add some value to you. Mark, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself?
You bet. Thanks, Brett. My name is Mark Mortensen, as Brett mentioned. I have been in the healthcare industry for much of my career. As some of you might know, the healthcare industry has been notoriously behind the curve as it relates to technology, particularly as it relates to technology in terms of the operationalizing business. And so I think my story is a little bit unique as far as the healthcare industry is concerned, but I think a good proxy for what many Salesforce.com licensees experience in terms of their implementation journey. So let me just mention, I think just as a segue, how I came to Touchpoint. As I said, I was the founder and the CEO of Salus Homecare, and early on, I think our organization was one of the early adopters of Salesforce. I knew it was a powerful tool. It came highly recommended, but I didn't really have an idea of what it did for my company. And so when I met Brett, and we got to kind of discussing, I realized that he was more of on the development end and not just one of the implementation partners, but could do customization development. I was really amazed at the value that his organization created for my organization. And so much so that I ultimately joined Touchpoint as a partner and now have the opportunity to not only share my experience, but help create a vision for other licensees who are struggling really like I did at the beginning of their journey. In fact, it was interesting that we were at a recent Salesforce conference, and they have breakout sessions. As some of you might know, they have breakout sessions depending upon what your profile is within an organization. And we happened to be sitting in one of the executive sessions when one of the CEOs leaned over and said, "I'm just here trying to figure out why I bought this." I think let me just ask you the question. Those of you that are on the webinar today, let me just ask you if this sounds like your experience. You get recommendations to use Salesforce. You get put in touch with a Salesforce rep. He gets you a license or a group of licenses, and then there's a train the trainer kind of implementation that's done with the anticipation that that trainer is now sufficiently educated to be able to train everyone else in the organization. And then they introduce you to an implementation partner with an email and a handshake, and there you go. You're off on your own, and it's really kind of a good luck thing. And I think that's where the information that has been researched and published is that 95% of licensees feel like they're not getting as much value out of Salesforce as Salesforce has to offer. I don't think there's great dispute about the value of Salesforce or what it could offer, but they just realize that they're underperforming as it relates to what they believe it could do. So there's just a couple of thoughts that I'd like to seed your minds with before we get into the detail of this discussion. And one is that you should be thinking about Salesforce.com as an evolution, not an event. I think too many people think that once they have the keys, and the licenses, and they've got all of their users updated, that they should have something. And really, that's the starting line. And the breadth and the depth of Salesforce.com's capabilities really are astonishing and can help you both grow your business, increase internal compliance, which I'll tell you a little, some anecdotal experiences about, and also make it more profitable, which I think we don't always kind of think about when we think about the expense related to licenses. So the theme here is that Salesforce is not, or the implementation, I should say, is not an event. It's an evolution, and the starting line is the licensing.
All right, thanks, Mark. We're going to hear all of the Salus story here, but I wanted to set the stage a little bit with a couple other examples of companies and how they view Salesforce to help them along that path. And hopefully this will lay the foundation a bit for what Mark talks through of what they've done at Salus. And the first example is eVista. And they are a company that was new to Salesforce. They knew that they needed some help in their providing their customers better service. They do environmental consulting in Southern California and Northern California areas. And their big struggle was how to manage the overall process. So we're really good at getting referrals, we're really good at the work we do, but we don't have any way to organize that. And so Salesforce was used to move their project management onto the cloud or into a single system. And so once they adopted Salesforce, we were able to move everything from the lead requesting service to their interaction with the lead, their interaction with the insurance companies, the project manager's efforts while he's on site or she's on site, gathering the samples and taking the pictures, all the way to submission of that to the labs and the lab results coming back was all built into Salesforce. And so it enabled them to grow their team that's out in the field without needing to grow the support staff that's inside of the organization. Another example is the Ochsner Health System, which is in the southeast portion of the United States. And they had been using Salesforce for some time and were getting a lot of value from it for their patient management and some services that were provided within the walls of their hospitals and clinics. But they wanted a better way to manage outreach to their elderly clients, those are elderly patients, those that are 65 and older. And they had an organization internally called the Golden Opportunity, which put on events and took them places and a way to keep their older members active. And to date, they had been managing all of that as they normally would with paper and people coming in and signing up for things in person. And the support staff needed for that was just too much, and they couldn't expand the number of members that they were reaching out to without providing some form of automation. And so when they came to us and talked through their needs, we were able to help them take advantage of the Salesforce communities that moved all of this effort into the cloud, where now their members were able to browse through events online, click into one, register for it, and make payment for the event without ever leaving their home, without ever needing to mail anything in or make a phone call. And the advantage of that is both internally the operations and the support that it took to complete the operations. It can be drastically reduced, as well as the experience for their patients. The ease of use to find and register and attend events really increased, and so they were able to find that they were making a bigger impact on that community than they had previously. And then Salus is a good example of an organization that's further along that path, and Mark will give the details, but just a little bit of an overview from the integrator side or the implementation side. Salus is in a highly regulated environment, and it's easy to really expand overhead to support the regulations required for your company in that environment. And Salesforce became a really strong adopter of Salesforce and the way that it could automate processes. so they're able to still comply with regulations with a way that wasn't requiring them to grow staff to do that. And I'll hand this over to Mark to talk through the details of that. Mark?
Okay, thanks, Brett. I'm excited to share with you a little bit about our experience. I should just give you an overview. I really attribute a lot of our growth and success to be made possible because of the vision that we were able to develop, really because of my relationship with Touchpoint. And we've gone from a very small organization to about 1,000 employees. And as you'll see, as I share this experience, it's been a vision that has been expanding with time. I'll tell you that I think we're one of the early adopters of Salesforce, and that we knew we needed something to manage our growth. I'm a big believer in the principle that visibility creates accountability. And when you're in an environment where much of what's happening takes place outside of your site, you really need something to be able to give visibility to that in order to be able to effectively manage, make informed decisions, and so forth. So we like many of you probably, were recommended Salesforce as a solution, and we went to a conference, became persuaded that it was worth the investment of the licenses. We were paired with an implementation partner, and that was that. And then the issue for us was we had a ton of data, and we wish we could do more with it. Now, bear in mind that we got some basic dashboards that were set up from the beginning, and they were useful. But I couldn't help but think, as the volume of data that was growing, and some of the actions or processes or workflows that needed to take place every time certain things took place, we're all manual. And I remember just lamenting the fact that at least I wasn't aware that we could do anything more. And then I met Brett at Touchpoint, and I knew he was a development partner, and that was doing more than just implementation, but doing customized development within the Salesforce kind of platform. And I remember lamenting to him that I just wish that I could do more with this. And he said, well, you can. And I remember my eyes got big, and so I was eager to get started. And he worked with me to develop a little bit of a vision by just asking me questions and prompting me through my thoughts on thinking about, what could be. And I'll be honest with you, when I started, I could only think of 5 workflows to automate. And but that was a transformative point for our organization, because the evolution of our Salesforce experience really began then. Today, we have over 80 automated workflows in Salesforce, and I'm going to share with you some of those things that have been transformative, that have both eliminated overhead and really optimized the customer experience in our organization. So I would tell you, before we get into maybe some of those specific experiences, I ought to just mention to you that we had what I felt like we had a lot of silos. And one of the things that we run into is we meet with customers, for Touchpoint, Salesforce licensees. They have their vision of Salesforce is a little bit skewed. Most Salesforce licensees, the way they view Salesforce is an application to manage sales. And while it can do that, and I think its origin is a CRM kind of orientation, the value is so much greater. And if the vision for Salesforce in an organization is only to manage sales and track sales activity, the benefit will be similarly limited. But in contrast, and so if I could just round out that thought. So you can think of a Salesforce as the sales application. You think of an HR system as the HR application, maybe a payroll system, an accounting system, and an operating system that may be customized for your industry, and you have all of these different systems. The challenge is you've got a lot of data issues, and usually what's happening is that data is exported into a spreadsheet, manipulated, and managed, so that you can manage it outside of any of these systems, really. The better way to view Salesforce is to view it as a platform. And if you think about this as a hub and spoke kind of model, with Salesforce being at the centerpiece of that and having all of these other systems feeding Salesforce, then you begin to have a different Salesforce experience. And you can run everything, your website, your employee records, your HR and compliance kinds of things, your accounting and transactional systems, and your operating systems all have a home in Salesforce and have your ability to build automated workflow out of that. And by that I mean every business has business rules, things that need to happen when certain conditions are satisfied. All of that can get automated in Salesforce if you operate that properly. Now, in our case, one of the first workflows that I wanted to address is that because we provide service in kind of a distributed environment, we're in the home health space, and so we're delivering care in homes. It was important to me that the customers had a voice, and if they were having an unsatisfactory experience, I wanted them to be able to effectively raise their hand. And we really had no mechanism for that until we built this automated workflow. And what we did through Salesforce is we reached out to those customers in the form of a satisfaction survey and just asked them. It was brief, but it was focused on their various kind of touch points with our organization. And to the degree that they had an unsatisfactory or were having an unsatisfactory experience, the moment they hit submit, as the CEO of the organization, my cell phone vibrated. And suffice it to say, it wasn't good for the people that were involved, my employees that were involved in that case, when they didn't deliver an exceptional service to those folks. And when people knew that there was going to be transparency in what they were doing and the customer was going to have a voice, it's probably not a surprise to realize that the number of people laying eggs in terms of service delivery went dramatically down, and that the customer experience and the satisfaction in that experience was dramatically improved. In fact, the other thing, so not only did it give them a voice, but we captured all of the scoring. We graded out each of the different departments in our organization based on the customer's perception, not based on ours. We created incentive compensation around making sure that the customers were having a wonderful experience. But we also gave customers that were having a wonderful experience a voice in a more literal way, where we invited them to share their experience, and then connected that to our website. And so the customers are basically populating our website regularly, and we don't pay for any SEO, and yet we rank first on the first listing on Google, because Google's looking for updated, ongoing, relevant, dynamic information, and our customers are keeping us high. Not to mention the fact that most every new customer tells us they've been online and they've seen that we are delivering a wonderful experience to the people that are entrusted to our care. So we have both automated something that was otherwise really a non-existent process and something that we just wished for, to something that we didn't think about, and yet we were reaching out, interested in their experience, and creating accountability internally with incentive compensation and promoting the good experiences that were happening, all that has helped propel our business forward. So that's just one. There's several workflows involved in that one, but that's just one of many. I'll give you just a couple of others to be thinking about that may have application of some kind in yours. As I mentioned to you earlier, there are business rules in every organization. One of the things, our company is nationally accredited for quality by an accrediting body, and one of the conditions that has to be satisfied is that you have to have a certain percentage of all of your employees receiving the flu vaccine. And so we went from a very few number of employees when we started to upwards of 1,000 employees now, and you can imagine finding out if everybody got the flu shot would be an administrative some administrative gymnastics to get that done. So what we've done through Salesforce, because we have all of our employees in Salesforce, not just our clients, which I'll get to here in a minute, but we have done automated recording of phone calls that go out, that are customized phone calls that go out to all of our employees. They're scheduled for the same time every year. And so we know that at a certain date, we'll tell all of the employees we're going to take a survey of whether or not they've gotten the flu vaccine. We'll provide education to them. And then within a week, we'll know, without anyone picking up a phone, we'll know the status of our entire workforce based on whether they received the vaccine or not. And the survey will say, did you receive it? Yes. And if not, it'll give them a menu of options about why not, so that we can focus our ongoing education and training around the perceptions that are keeping people from being vaccinated. So we're using Salesforce not only to eliminate administrative burdens, but we're also doing it to focus on ongoing improvement without having to do that or pay anybody to do that for us at all. And that's really a one-time development cost with a kind of a return that goes into the future. The other thing that we do, as I mentioned, I think one of the challenges and the limits that most organizations have as it relates to Salesforce is they view it really for a sales activity, as I mentioned previously. We have realized that we have a lot of different constituencies with whom we want to interact, for whom we want to measure our success and our compliance. So rather than just dealing with one of the constituencies, which is our customers, we are now dealing with our employees, and we're connected as part of viewing the Salesforce as a platform. We are now feeding Salesforce with our HR information, our personnel information, and compliance as it relates to licenses expiring or insurance expiring, and education. Do they have the right education? And so we have dashboards now. And the benefit of that, one of the buzzwords today is that industries and companies want to create a uniform customer experience. But the irony of that is, if you look inside any organization, most organizations are not uniform internally because they're functioning out of different platforms. If you can get one platform, in this case Salesforce, and let Salesforce be the hub and the clearinghouse of all of the data, you can create harmony internally, which will dramatically increase the likelihood of external harmony among the customers that we deal with. So, to summarize my story with Salesforce, when we began, we realized that not only did we not have vision, but we didn't have enough work that we could think to do to hire an internal administrator, because really all that person was going to do is set up users and maybe create some dashboards. But what we realized we needed was somebody who had more vision than we did. And so we needed to have a development partner. And for me, finding the development partner is like outsourcing your IT department. So many of the applications are in the cloud these days that that really what you need is somebody who can manage that data and put it, create harmony around it. So Touchpoint for us has been that outsourced IT department. We found a partner that we could trust, that could help us kind of flesh out our vision and continue to modify and maintain our systems as the business grows and evolves. And then, as I have mentioned, today we run our entire business through Salesforce, and I think have created really something pretty special in terms of internal harmony and external kind of uniformity in terms of customer experience and excellent customer experience. I think the last thing that I would share is really, what does this mean for my business? As I just mentioned, the customer experience has been vital, and not just crossing my fingers and hoping that it's good, but giving them a voice. Giving them a voice has created a level of visibility on really everything that's important to us as it relates to internal compliance, external service, and that visibility leads to accountability. I'm a firm believer that what you measure improves, and when you measure and report on what you're measuring, the rate of improvement accelerates. So, and the last element here is to really realize that Salesforce, when used properly, can be a revenue and a profit center, which I think is ironic for a lot of people to think about that, because I think most people are just feeling the pain of writing a check for the licensing fees, because they don't realize that if it's used well, it can actually be the vehicle through which your customers are selling your company, as they do with ours. And that drives not only the growth of the company, but the profitability of the company, when you don't need to hire so much administrative support to manage data through spreadsheets. So Brett, I think that's really my story, and I hope it's been beneficial for those that are wondering, where do I go from here, and how can I make that happen? So I turn it back to you.
Yeah, Mark, thank you for that. It is a great story, and an example of a company that's really adopted Salesforce in all aspects of its operations, from even beyond reaching out to customers. One thing to mention on this is, once you're on Salesforce, you really are on that evolution path. And there's a number of things that you can do yourself through Salesforce, meaning Salesforce, the support team, or through a group like Touchpoint. Salesforce has what they call apps and accelerators, and once you're using Salesforce, these can become available to you. We, in like manner, have apps and accelerators of our own that you can see listed here. But really, the whole idea of this slide is to let you see that there's things that you can plug into Salesforce, or quick efforts that you can make to expand the use of Salesforce, where you can get to that uniform customer experience, because all aspects of your organization can be run through Salesforce, as Mark has shown us that Salus can do. And then, Mark, I'll turn it over to you for the last analogy here.
Well, I think maybe something that maybe all of us can relate to a little bit is, a lot of us have to remodel our homes from time to time. I recently went through that with my wife, and I think my experience, it occurred to me, my experience in remodeling our home was a lot like my experience in dealing with or implementing Salesforce. And that is that we knew we needed to do something with our home. We didn't know what. We acknowledged, my wife and I acknowledged that that we didn't know what the possibilities even were. So the first point was we just decided we'd hire an interior designer and not commit to do anything, but just to get a vision for what could be done and a roadmap. And so we did that. We hired an interior designer. It didn't cost that much, and we were blown away by the things that this person shared with us about what could be in our home. And I think I would just encourage all of you who are listening today to take a similar approach, because the critical piece is to create some organizational vision about the possibilities and not be limited to what you can see. Get somebody, whether it's like a development partner, whether it's a Touchpoint or another designer, to just give you a vision about the possibilities that could exist, and then determine about the pace and the scope of that development, so that you can do it in a measured, predictable, financially responsible kind of way. And I think if you'll do that, you will realize that there's a lot more to offer that can be really exciting for an organization as you move forward.
Thanks, Mark. And to that end, for those that would like to have a complimentary vision or discussion about what could be, those that do attend the webinar can call and contact us, and we'll be happy to do that at no charge, really just to help you understand what can be in Salesforce. And with that, I'll turn it back to the moderator to see if we've had any questions come in.
Yeah, we've got quite a few actually. Please keep them coming. If we can't get to all of your questions today, Mark and Brett will reply to you directly. The first one here, let me just read it to you guys. I'm intrigued by your business process review. How much time is needed, and who on my team needs to be involved?
I can take that one. So the business process review really is the first step of creating the vision. The time involved really depends on the size of the organization and the scope of possibility. So for larger organizations, it could be a number of days, 2 to 3 weeks to complete. For most, it can be completed in 4 or 5 one-hour sessions. And that would be with stakeholders or those who can represent a certain process. For instance, somebody from the field sales, somebody from inside sales, somebody from HR. And so it really would vary based on your organization. But at least to get started, you could probably expect a few days for it to be completed with findings back to you.
Second question, this all sounds great, but we're just too busy with day-to-day operations. How did you find the time for all of this?
Well, I think if I could just suggest, I think that's really the point, is somebody needs to have their head above water long enough to be able to see. And that's why it makes the most sense. It made the most sense to me, and I still would advocate for any organization to outsource the administrative services, to find somebody like this interior designer idea, or whether it's Touchpoint or someone else that you use in that role. But the idea is to outsource that. Touchpoint, for example, will do, for a very reasonable fee, will do your administrative services, but then be able to give you an idea of where you can go from there. And so if you can capture that vision and realize that you can get a resource on board that brings more than you can see, it changes everything.
Okay, third question. I like the idea of outsourcing an admin. What does it cost? And then how do you measure success and your return on investment?
I can help with the first part. Then, Mark, maybe you can talk through measuring the return on investment. So for Touchpoint, we have an Admin Plus and an Admin Basic type of plans. The Admin Basic can start as low as 10 hours per month as for a set fee of $1,500 a month for Admin Basic for 10 hours. And then on the top end, it can be really customized to what you need. If it's above 40 hours, 80 hours a month, then it's a discussed rate.
As it relates to the measure of success and return, I'm pretty black and white on this. I think that if you can't eliminate jobs, that might sound harsh that way, but then you're doing it wrong. You should be able to eliminate administrative roles if you use Salesforce to automate the way that it can. So number one, there should be a savings that outweighs the cost, number one. And then in terms of the return, you can pretty easily measure growth that takes place as a function of the initiatives that you undertake. And as I shared in our organization, that we turned Salesforce into really a facilitator of the way for our customers to sell our services, and it's interesting to see that more and more customers are going online to do their research, and what they're seeing is from other customers. It's pretty easy to see the return.
All right, and gentlemen, we have got time for one more question. There are several others in the queue. As mentioned, Mark and Brett will reply directly to you. So the last question, we are focused on creating an exceptional customer experience. We've never thought of Salesforce as an enabler. How else can the tool work for us?
I can take a stab at this one. It's actually kind of a difficult question to answer because there really aren't any limits. Salesforce is a platform. I think Mark had mentioned that the name can be a little misleading. It's not just a sales tool, but you can really build a custom, personalized customer experience without many limits. So what I would recommend is that you start with a small implementation, a small solution, and Salesforce makes that very easy through templated communities and some templated automation that would allow you just to first interact with your customers in a basic way. And that really just gets you on the path. And then you get continual learning back from your customers. You find what is most meaningful and what they can do without, and you hone it as you go. But the whole idea is start with a minimal investment and then proof it out and get more value to your customers based on their feedback as you go. I don't know if Mark, if you have anything to add to that one.
No, I think you're right about really the limits are really what you can envision, and I would just say to improve the customer experience, number one, make sure you give them a voice, and Salesforce can be the facilitator of that. And number two, make sure there is if you're focused and desirous to have a uniform customer experience, make sure you're creating uniformity internally and using a platform like Salesforce that your organization is viewing, so the eyes internally are on the same elements that you're determining will lead to success.
Excellent. I believe we're at the top of our hour, so I appreciate everyone's time today. As mentioned, any questions that were not answered will be directly answered by Mark and Brett. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.